Hey friends, I hope everyone's doing great today. I just got back from taking Coco for a long walk outside, so my cheeks might be a little bit flushed. It's been raining cats and dogs in Charlotte here for the last several days, so we've got a break in the weather this morning, and I decided to take Coco out for a walk while we've got an opportunity to not get soaking wet. I don't know about you, but I always feel so much better after I take a nice long walk outside. Just even though it was chilly and it's gray skies and overcast, it's also, there were so many great, beautiful things to see on the walk. The trees are starting to bud. There's the creeks were overflowing, so a lot of good things to see out there today. So let me get into the purpose of this video today. I have decided to do a series of video tutorials about my art journaling practice. And I want to be clear who the target audience is for this series of videos. So if you are an accomplished fine artist, these videos will probably not be for you because they're really going to go over very, very basic techniques. And the primary objective of the videos is to just show you how much fun and how much joy you can get from a art journaling practice. So I'll be doing things like some watercolor tutorials. I'll be going over what type of art journals I use, the type of supplies that I use, different techniques that I use in my art practice, all very, very basic. If you are a beginner who's never picked up a paintbrush in your entire life and who swears you don't have a creative bone in your body, I absolutely promise you, you can do this. And the reason I'm doing this series is there are so many benefits of having a regular creative practice, and it's really not at all about the outcome. It's not about creating, a beautiful piece of art that you can hang on your wall or, sell as a fine artist. It's really just about the practice, the experience of making art that has the potential to lift your mood and just bring you a lot of peace and joy. So let me talk a bit about what I'm going to be doing today specifically and the supplies that you'll need. Let's start with supplies. This is going to be a watercolor tutorial, so you'll need watercolor. Basic, cheapo watercolors are fine. Crayola, a set of Crayola watercolors you can get at the drugstore will totally do the trick. If you have watercolors, fine artist watercolors that you enjoy using, definitely break those out. I'm going to be using a combination of Jane Davenport watercolors, which come in this cute little turquoise tin. And as those have been running out, I've been refilling them with Daniel Smith watercolors. Daniel Smith is probably my absolute favorite brand of artist grade watercolors for two reasons. One, the materials that it's made with, the minerals and pigments that the watercolor is made with, are beautiful and produce some really interesting granulation as the watercolor dries. So it's super fun to work with those. Two, it is a Seattle-based company, and Seattle is my hometown, so I love to support a local, mom and pop company as much as I can. So supply number one you're going to need is watercolors. If you don't have watercolors, but let's say you have craft paints, you could use those too. Just put some out on your palette or a paper plate or whatever whatever you've got around, an extra piece of paper, and add a whole bunch of water. Just water them down a whole bunch so that they have a watercolor-like consistency. So even if you don't have watercolors, but you've got craft paint or, you know, acrylic ink or something like that, you can play along. So paint, watercolor paint is item number 1. Item number 2 you're going to need is paper. I will be working in my Moleskine art journal. It's a very large art journal and I love it. I encourage you to, you know, keep an art journal, but if you don't have one, regular, you know, you could use regular printer cartridge paper. You could use watercolor paper that is actually designed for use with watercolor. The paper I am using today, my Moleskine journal, is not actually designed for use with watercolor. So caveat that if you choose to use a paper that is not watercolor paper, you might experience some buckling of your paper, so like wavy lines as the wet watercolor goes down on the paper. I personally don't mind that, but if that is going to bug you, then you might want to grab some inexpensive watercolor paper, which you can get at, you know, Michael's, Target, any place like that. Okay, third thing you're going to need is paintbrushes. I will be using a combination of less expensive paintbrushes that can be used with any type of paint, you know, acrylic, watercolor, etc., and some paintbrushes that are specifically made for use with watercolor, just because I have them and I love them. I'll be using a variety of sizes, a variety of different shapes, but even if you just have one grungy old paintbrush or the one paintbrush that comes with your, you know, kids' watercolor set, you can still play along. No reason why you can't. So paintbrushes, gonna need those. And then the last things that you'll need are some type of container to have water in it to dip your brushes in. I actually recommend having 2 containers, one that you can clean your brush off in and another that you keep as fresh water to help dilute your paints. And the second thing you'll need is either a, you know, rag that you don't mind getting paint on, or paper towels, kitchen rolls, something like that. So those are all the supplies that you're going to need. And I promise you we're going to have a good time. This is no pressure. We're just going to be painting lines and squiggles and shapes with our brushes and seeing what they can do. So there's no way you can mess this up. I promise you. All right, so with that, I'm gonna go get my studio set up and we'll get into the tutorial. Hey friends, hopefully you're all set up and ready to go. I've got my studio table all set up here. Thank goodness you can't see the rest of my studio because it looks like an explosion happened in here. There is stuff everywhere, but that's okay. All right, so I've got my journal. As I mentioned in the intro, this is my Moleskine extra large journal. It is not watercolor paper. So you'll notice on this page over here where I did some practice runs, I don't know if you can see it in the light or if it's close enough, but the color is kind of bleeding into the paper and there's a little bit of buckling that's going on, but you know what? I don't really care about that. It doesn't matter to me at all. The one thing I will caution you on is if you are using a thinner paper and you've got it directly on a surface, you might want to put something underneath the paper. I would hate to have moisture go through your paper and, you know, mess up your kitchen table or coffee table or, you know, something important that you don't want to get messed up. So protect your workspace. Okay, so I've got my journal, I've got my watercolors. This one right here is the watercolor set I mentioned in the intro. when I looked back at my watercolors, it actually wasn't this one. This is the Jane Davenport set. I think it's called Brights. I'm not sure if she sells it anymore, but they used to sell it in Michael's. I know they don't sell it in Michael's anymore, but she might sell it on her website. But warning, she's in Australia. And so if you order something from her website, the international shipping can be sort of brutal. But they are very nice, highly pigmented watercolors. So, and it's such a cute little set. Perfect for travel or whatnot. Okay, and then this is the set that I have been refilling with Daniel Smith watercolors, and it's actually, I don't want to tip this too far. I might put a picture in there later because these are kind of wet. It's actually a watercolor set that the kid's grandmother used a long time ago, and we found it in a box of stuff at the family cabin, and my ex-husband's mother, my mother-in-law, gave it to me. So this one has some sentimental meaning to me, and I've just been filling in the pans, these round pans, with Daniel Smith watercolor as it's been getting used up. So we've got watercolor, I've got my water over here, and I've got my brushes. What I am using for brushes, I'm using a Princeton Art and Brush Co. 10 round, and you can see it's called a round because of the shape of the brush. And what's cool about a round brush is that you can get it to a super fine point like that, or you can also sort of flatten it out. Obviously, if it's full of paint, you're not going to be using your hands to flatten it out. But in the process of using it, it can be flat or it can be very pointy like that. So that's kind of cool. This shape is called a filbert shape, and you can see it's kind of a combo between a flat, this is a flat brush, not a lot of explanation needed here. It's basically just a square or rectangular brush with the bristles that go straight across. And this one is the filbert, which is this one, is a variation on that, in that it is flat on the sides, but it's got this rounded end. And this one, it says 16. I think I got this in a pack of brushes at Target in the arts and crafts section. And then this one, the flat, this is, the full name is a flat wash. This is a Princeton brush, and this is a 3/4 inch or 1.9 centimeter flat wash brush. And those are the brushes we're going to play around with today. So I'm going to flip to my page in my journal. I'm not hiding this for any particular reason. I just have this paint over here is still kind of wet, and I don't want it to transfer onto the thing that is on that other journal page. So here's our fresh journal page, and I have just labeled the different experiments we're going to be doing with our brushes. Mostly so that I don't forget what I'm doing here. Okay, so the very first thing you're going to want to do is activate your watercolors. And what that means is you want to get them wet. I use a little spray bottle like this to do it and just spray. I've already activated mine because I didn't want to have to wait around on camera. You don't have to have a spray bottle. Another way you can do it is to just dip your paintbrush into the clean water, and then you'll get a bunch of water on your brush, and then you can come over and just drip it into each section that you want to activate. You can activate all of your colors. That's usually what I do. You can just activate the specific colors you want to use. If you're only going to use 1 or 2 colors, that's probably what I would recommend doing. And it doesn't really matter what colors you use today. I'm going to be switching it up, using lots of different colors probably every time I switch to a new brush or switch to a new brush technique. I'll probably change up my colors, so I've activated them all. And then up here in the corner, I'm not sure if you can see that. You could see my thumb, but I've got 2 containers of water. I've got one, yeah, you can see that a little bit, which you can see is kind of a pinkish color that I've been using to rinse my paintbrushes off. And then I've got this coffee cup, which has a whole bunch of paint rings in it, because that's what I use it for, that I'm going to be using for my fresh water. And then I have grabbed an old tea towel that I use to clean my brushes off as I go. That's it. And I have a cup of tea. And hopefully I won't accidentally clean off my brushes in my tea. Has happened before. Okay, let's get into it. I think I will start with the round brush. Again, this is a Princeton Art and Brush Co. round 10. And we're gonna start up here just doing thin lines. You may hold your brush closer to the tip on this metal part, or you may hold it closer to the end. The closer to the brush, the bristles that you hold your paintbrush, the more control you will have. I like to vary it up. Usually I'm holding my brush somewhere in the middle, but what I don't like to do, just because it's uncomfortable, is have like a vice grip on my brush. But you know, experiment, see what works for you. Okay, first thing I'm gonna do is load up some paint onto my paintbrush. And I'm just using this space in my paint palette to get the paint nice and worked into my brush. Here you can see that. And I can also add more water directly to that. I can mix other colors in there, so fun. All right, we're gonna start with thin lines, and I'm going to see how thin I can get this. So what I really wanna do is just get the very tip of that brush onto the paper. And you can do them, your lines, in whatever direction you want. I'll probably vary it up a little bit. Let's see what happens if I get, yeah, definitely more control. You can do a skip in your lines. I'm just playing around to see how thin I can get these lines. And I'm noticing that as I have less paint on my brush, it's a little bit easier to control the lines. You'll notice my lines aren't perfect. I like it that way. I like them sort of wonky and a little bit more organic. Ooh, that's a nice thin one. If I were to use a smaller brush, obviously I could get a much thinner line. So for example, here, let me see if I can pull. This is a 2. I could get probably a super, super thin line if I were to use, ooh, or here we go. What's this one? Yeah, also a 2. I could get a really, really thin line if I were to use that, but I don't actually like to use teeny tiny paintbrushes. That's not my style. Okay, so that's the round brush, thin lines with the round brush. I'm going to give that a nice rinse in my rinse water. And let's see what we can do with our filbert brush. And let's see, how about, let's go for orange this time. All right. And if you're finding that your brush is too dry, load it up with more paint. If you're finding that it's too wet, don't load it up with so much. So again, this is all about experimenting. So you really can't mess this up. All right, I'm gonna put my filbert brush to the side so that I've got the skinny part that I'm making the lines with. And let's see what we can do here. Yeah, that's nice. Okay, yeah, fun. So that's what lines are like using our filbert. And now let's try using our flat brush. Let me just dip it in the water a bit. How about we do a blue color this time? I did not get activated, but that's okay. Add a little bit of water to that and we are good to go. Okay, so let's see what we can do here. Ooh, that's kind of fun. I noticed that when it sort of swoops side to side, I can get some variation in my line. And if I hold it really still, I can get a pretty thin line. Again, using it on the tip. Let's see, what about like this? Yeah, that's pretty good. I don't paint thin lines like this very often in my work. I prefer larger brush strokes, but if I was going to do fine lines, I think I could use any of these brushes to make it happen. All right, here we go. Thin lines. Let's move on to thick lines. I'm going to go back to my round 10. And this time, let's go for some green. This bright, bright, bright green. Okay, so what I want to do this time is, I don't want to ruin my brush, but what I want to do is sort of press my brush into the paper so that I can get the bristles to flatten out as much as possible and give me a thick line. So with a round brush, sort of holding it at an angle and pulling it right across the paper. And I can get a pretty good sized thick line using this round brush. Let's try one more time. Yeah, pretty good. You'll notice where I pick up my brush, there's a little extra bloom of color. I do not mind that at all. In fact, I kind of like that. I like how watercolor is unpredictable and does things like that. If that bothers you, you can just go back in. We call this dropping in color, and go back over the same area. And if it's wet, the watercolor will just travel and fill in. So if you don't like the bloom, there are ways to fix it. Personally, I kind of like it, so I rarely go back and edit things like that. Okay, let's try the flat brush this time. And let's go back to our blue. So this time I want the widest part of the brush to be making contact with my paper. And then I'm just going to pull the brush across. And I might go back and grab that pool of paint and pull it across again so I can fill in that area where my brush sort of skipped. Yeah. That's it. Thick lines. You can get a nice thick line using your flat brush. Okay, last brush for thick lines. Let's do, how about if we dip into some yellow? And let me mix it with this orange. Okay. Same story. I want the fattest part of the brush to kind of get smushed down into the paper. Okay. Nice. Let's move on to variable lines. What we're going to do now is combine thin lines with thick lines in a single continuous brush stroke. So let's start with our round 10, and let's go in maybe with this kind of orangey brown color. And so I'm going to start thin, then I'm going to lift up my brush, and then I'm going to push it back down again and lift up my brush, all while I'm still maintaining contact with the paper. And you might not get this on your first try. That's okay. Just experiment, practice. Does not have to, we're not going for perfection here. Okay, so I'm going to make contact with the paper. I'm going to push my brush down. And then as I'm moving it, I'm going to release the pressure. And then press down again. Still brush is moving, releasing the pressure. Press down again, brush is still moving, releasing the pressure. Press down again, release. Okay, so you can see I'm getting some nice variable lines there. Let me do it a little bit faster this time. Press, release, press, release, press, release. Okay, fun. Let's go to our filbert, and I think I want some of this turquoisey color because it's so pretty. And I might mix it with this blue to make more of a cyan blue. Okay, I think I'm going to hold the brush on the side like this, my filbert brush, just to see what happens. So again, same motion, push down as I'm moving, release pressure, push down, release, push down, release, push down, release. So a little bit different line. Let's see what happens when we use the brush on this angle. Push down, release, push down, release, push down, release. So yet again, a little bit of a different look to it. Okay, finally, we're going to come in with our flat brush, our flat 3/4 inch. And how about if we do red for this one? So I'm loading up my brush. Okay, again, I'm going to start with it on the skinny side. Press down, release, down, release, down, release, down. Okay. And let's do one more. This time, let's use the fat side of the flat brush. I'm not sure we're going to get a ton of variation here, but this is really just about experimentation. So yeah, not a lot of line variation when you use it flat side, with the flat side making contact with the paper. And that's what this is about, is experimenting and learning what your brushes do, how they react when you do different stuff. Okay, stamping. This is one of my favorite techniques to use, and one of the things I like to say when I have classes is let your brush do the work for you. There's no need for you, for example, to like painstakingly draw the shape of like a leaf or a petal or something like that and color it in. You don't need to do that. Just find the right brush. And the way you find the right brush is by experimenting to see what your brushes do when you do different stuff with them. So let's go for, how about a nice green? Okay, and stamping is exactly what it sounds like. You just press the brush down, lift it up. Press the brush down, lift it up. Press it down, lift it up. So I'm seeing that the shape that I get from this round brush is kind of fun, right? Maybe it's a petal for a flower. Maybe it's a leaf. Again, if you do not like the way that the paint blooms when you do this technique, come back in and fill it in. Not a big deal. I don't tend to do that, but if that is your preference and your thing, that is cool. Okay, let's see what happens when we do it with the filbert. Okay, I'm gonna start on the skinny side. So kind of a similar shape, but more of a elongated, almost triangle shape. So I could see that being petals on a flower, or, you know, scales on a dragon. Okay, let's now see what happens when we do it with the fat side down. Ooh, that's kind of fun. Almost looks like a thumbprint. Or an acorn. Okay, last brush. Let's see what happens when we stamp with the flat brush. So let's start with it almost straight up and down. And we get this kind of cool, skinny line. That would be great for just creating texture, interest. Now let's see what happens when we do it. I need some more paint. When we do it on the side. Very similar to the filbert. And then what about if we do it using the fat part? Yeah, kind of just looks like the shape of the head of the paintbrush. So there you have it. Stamping, easy peasy and kind of fun. Now we're gonna do a press and release or a press and flick technique. And really it's a variation on the stamping technique. So let's start with our round. Let's go back to our round. This time I think I'll go with this orangey red color. Okay, so essentially what I'm going to do is push down my brush, and as I pull it up, I'm going to flick, 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 flick. So you get a very different effect when you do that. And it could be a difficult technique or motion, I should say, to master, but just practice. Okay, so that's with our round. Let's switch to our filbert and let's go for some green. Ooh, that's nice. It sort of looks like a flower petal. Right? Or if you slowed it down a little bit, you could make leaf shapes. Fun. Okay, let's see what happens when we use a similar motion with our flat brush. So let's push down, flick, push down, flick. Ooh, I think that's my favorite of all that we've done. And I'm using it with the skinny side, making contact with the paper. This looks like flower petals. Very fun. Okay, press and release or press and flick. Last one, kids. I'm gonna start with the flat brush for the bricks shape. And this is really just sort of a press and release using the flat side of the paintbrush. Let's get some red on here. Okay, so just lay it down, press, pick it up, press and pick it up, press and pick it up. Press. And if you want it to be, okay, so nice and clean. Don't press. Just make contact with the very tip of your brush and pull it along just a little bit. So you're kind of doing a teeny tiny little thick line like we did over here. And really, bricks, this is the way to go. A flat brush is absolutely the way to go if you're going to do bricks. But if you want to do bricks with other colors, you can. How about we'll do, this is the round that I'm grabbing right now, loading it up with some orange. And let's see how we can make a brick. So you are gonna have to come in and square off those corners. So it's a lot more work and a lot less precise than just using the flat brush. And I suspect it will be similar with our filbert. What color should we use to round this out? How about, I haven't used this bright pink color yet. Let's do that. Okay. Yep. So a little bit more rounded again on the edges than if you were to do it with a flat brush. Yeah, that's it. So I honestly could spend like hours and hours and hours doing this and just playing around, practicing different brush strokes, seeing what my brushes do, seeing what different sizes of the same type of brush do, which I like better, which I don't like. So, you know, just play around. It's a great way to understand how to use your brushes to create all kinds of different effects on the page. So that's it for me today. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you played along. And if you have any requests on tutorials that you want me to do sooner rather than later, drop a comment. If you enjoyed this video and you want me to do more, drop a thumbs up, drop a like. I would appreciate it. And yeah, this is it. That was fun. So have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time. Peace out.